Center for Educational Media and the College of Education at Middle Tennessee State University are proud to offer professional development to K-12 educators in Tennessee through our online video library. These videos are aligned with standards set by the Tennessee Department of Education. For more professional development videos, check out our website at www.mtsu.edu/CEM.
I am pleased to present our first presenters, and we have a double session because this topic has been requested so often in feedback, multiple times over multiple years. And so Dr. Larry Chrisman and Ms. Katie Fan. Dr. Chrisman is Behavior Specialist in Rutherford County Schools, and Ms. Katie Fan is BCBA, Rutherford County Schools. So we're happy to have you all here today and look forward to this presentation. So come on up.
Well, guys, as she said, I'm Larry Chrisman. This is Katie Finn. I'm going to let her do a better introduction of herself and maybe give you a little background on us. I'm currently a behavior specialist with Rutherford County Schools. Prior to that, I was working in the behavior management classroom, the ED classroom, emotionally disturbed classroom for 8 years over 2 different counties. Prior to that, I was working in inclusion, and I've also worked in youth villages, and a lot of background regarding me relative to that. This is actually my second career. I started as an attorney, and I moved into education for several reasons we won't get into. But during the time, even in grad school, I worked in youth villages. So I've worked with a great spectrum of different behaviors and different classifications of students. So that's a little bit of my background that has allowed me to get to here and kind of forms, I guess, my idea and concepts and understandings of behavior.
I'm Katie Fan. I work now as a lead behavior specialist at Rutherford County Schools. But I started in special ed the minute I turned 18. I was working in a residential school for 4 years as an EA. I think I've now been working in special ed longer than I haven't in my life. So I worked there. I've worked with Rutherford County for a long time. Started as a structured setting classroom teacher there. I've worked in Savannah, Georgia, and Charleston, South Carolina. I was a self-contained autism classroom teacher there. And then I became a behavior specialist here about maybe 9 or 10 years ago. So my entire life, really, my entire adult life has been surrounded by special education. And I always seem to gravitate towards those students that had behavior needs. So that's kind of what led me to here, and we're continuing another year.
So it's been my experience as it relates to the audience that many of you vary, and she said that there are some who are experienced teachers, some who are new teachers, and I find that most people in these particular sections fall into pretty much three categories. There are the extra excited people, the happy Monday, happy Tuesday, happy Wednesday people. We need you guys today. Your energy helps feed us on today. Love those people. That is very helpful. We also have the group of people who are experienced and feel like they've learned pretty much everything they can learn. And for those people, you can see me after the session. I can show you how to operate PowerPoint, and you can teach this yourself. And then the final group, which I'm concerned about and I feel compelled to try to reach at times, but sometimes it can be frustrating, and that's the group that actually does not desire to get better. And I hope none of you are a part of that group. But to that group that is jaded and does not desire to get better, I'll tell you that they're opening a Buc-ee's, and they have very competitive wages. So that's what I say to you guys. But I hope we have so many more from the first group. I hope that you're energized and excited to be here. And we certainly are grateful and happy to have an opportunity to share with you guys. So the title of our session is Classroom Behavior Management. How did we get here? And as it relates to that, many of you have been in situations where you have had kids whose behavior may escalate, or maybe it's just the atmosphere of your room. You feel like, how do I get to this certain point where I no longer feel like I'm in control of the classroom? And to discuss that, we have to discuss the elephant in the room first. And the elephant in the room in the equation of behavior is us. And we often do not like to have those types of discussions. We like to focus on the kid and what the kid is doing and what is happening with the kid and how bad they are. And there's hardly anything more frustrating to me than to hear someone say we have a bad kid. We have kids that have challenges that need different levels of support. But when I hear someone say, I have a bad kid, to me, that means you're writing them off and you no longer feel responsible for what they do in your room. So that frustrates me personally, personal issue. I'll get over it. But what we want to discuss is where are we in the process, and how did we get to the process where we feel like we've lost a connection with the student or we've lost control of the classroom. And we do have to have a discussion of ourselves. So part of that is, what have you seen? What has formed who you are as a teacher, and what have you observed that has led to where you are now? So that first question I ask is, what teacher did you hate most in school? And almost immediately, when I ask that question, everyone I can see in their eyes, they formulate an answer. There's an answer to the teacher that I hated the most, because there's like an emotional attachment to that question. And a lot of times when you think of that teacher, an emotion is attached to it, and you immediately go back to that emotion and how you felt inside that room when you were with that teacher. And it's difficult for me to have this discussion because immediately there's a teacher that pops into my mind. And I know why this relationship was difficult. And I see so many opportunities of things that I know now that I'm in education. I'm like, there were so many opportunities for that teacher to connect with me. There were so many learning opportunities as opposed to what they did and how they treated me. And then I began to appreciate those good teachers out there who work so hard with students. To share a little bit of my story, and I rarely ever share it, is the teacher that I had the most trouble with had difficulty connecting with minority students. I'll say it that way. And I was a minority student who, particularly in this class, it was social studies. I love history. I had a lot to say. I was talkative in this class because I love social studies. And when I offered my input during class, it was not appreciated. And sometimes I was told to be quiet. And I began to understand the dynamics of that room, that I was being treated a little bit differently. And I think it was just a matter for us as teachers of recognizing areas where we may be a little bit deficient. Meaning that there are students that maybe you have difficulty connecting with. And everybody does. I don't care what your ethnic background is. I don't care how long you've been teaching. There's going to be a group of students that you have a little more difficulty connecting with. And you need to know your areas of deficiencies and know your weaknesses so that you can move on from that. But when I asked this question, what teacher did you hate the most? What did they do? What did they do poorly? And the main thing that I implore you as teachers is know the things that they did poorly to make sure that you never engage in those types of behaviors. You never do that. And I want you to also remember this, that teacher that was the hardest on you in school, that you had the most difficulty with, you still feel that. For me, I'm almost 50. It's 37 years later. when I think of this student's name, this teacher's name, there's an emotional connection to that 11 and 12-year-old boy, which I feel like she mishandled, missed an opportunity, and just being honest, she could have lost me. I could have been lost. I could have said, forget education, forget school, I hate school. But I'm going to say this too because there's another side to the story. Because that next year, I had the best group of teachers that I think I could have possibly had. And I think they saved me. Because had I had a repeat of what I had had the year before, I would have been lost. I would have said, forget education, forget trying to do well. But they redeemed my faith in school. They made me want to come to school. So I'm still thankful. I reach out to those teachers and let them know that they were a redeeming experience for me in my educational journey. And I'm so grateful and thankful to them. And I want you to understand that it literally is that important. The connection that you make with your students is that important. It can have an emotional impact on them 30 years later. It can cause them to desire not to want to come to school. It can cause them to emotionally give up on education. So our interactions with our kids, us creating an environment that is safe for our kids, is that important. And it can make a very long-lasting impact on our kids. But I don't want to leave it there. I want to talk about the teacher. What teacher did you like the most in school? The teacher, and I'm sure you can state that in your mind. I'm sure the same. In fact, I wish you could see what I saw. I literally saw your facial expressions change when I talked about your worst experience as opposed to your best experience. All your facial expressions changed because I could see you, your eyes lit up, smiles came over your faces as you began to think of that positive experience. I'll shout her name out since this is positive. One of my favorite teachers, I'm from Shelbyville. Her name was Artist Rittenberry. She was a math teacher. She was amazing. And it wasn't just the math that she was teaching. It was the connection that she made with her students. And I still think about her. I still think about her words. She still communicates with me as well. But geometry is geometry, advanced math is advanced math. That wasn't what excited me. It was the connection that she made with each student, and it wasn't just me. It's every student that was in that room. We are responsible for the environments that we create in our rooms, and if our students will learn better, and this is scientific, if they make an emotional connection with that learning. So if they feel safe, and that's the number one thing we have to do as teachers, make sure our students are safe and make them feel safe. I always felt safe, I always felt supported, not just physically, but emotionally in her room because of the environment that she created. Don't you have anything, Kate? All right. Your overall effectiveness is almost invariably a medium value of the standard you have personally observed. It's difficult to be better than something that you've seen. My ELA English reading teachers will tell you usually good writing comes from a child who does a lot of reading because they read and they observe what good writing looks like, so that helps them to be a better writer. The same thing is with the teacher. It's difficult to be better than what you've observed. Now, there are a few exceptions. There's your Steve Jobs, those Elon Musk, those people who don't really have a template before them to observe the type of achievements that they've made in life. But most of us, we're a median value of that which we have observed, usually the best of what we've observed. We usually maybe not reach that height of what we've observed, but we're somewhere in the middle of that of which we observe. So it's important for us to observe good teaching. Most schools have a mentor teacher. I know most of you have seen or been mentor teachers. You've seen that. They're trying to it's a very important example for them to get what good teaching looks like. But part of what good teaching looks like has to also be good behavior management. It's difficult to be a good teacher if you can't not manage the behavior in that classroom. So what I've found, and I found this to be a rule, there's somebody in your buildings or who you teach with or who you work with that does something better than you do. They might not do everything better than you, but they do something better than you. So it's important to observe them and to find out what are they doing, how are they being so effective and impactful. Katie and I often sit in rooms where a student's behavior is being discussed with a lot of their teachers, and invariably there'll be one teacher who's like, I don't have any problems with this kid. And we're like, and then immediately I'm like, okay, what are you doing? What are you doing that is not being experienced amongst the other teachers? What are you doing that the other teachers are not seeing? And we have to acknowledge that sometimes somebody does something better than we do. And the only way that we can get better is to first acknowledge that I desire to get better, because nobody gets better if you think you're the best at everything. You have to acknowledge that I can be better. So let me observe someone who does something and they may do it a little better than I do. But I promise you there's one teacher who does something better than you. If we observe them, that gives us an opportunity to get better. But we first have to acknowledge it. I'm not perfect. There are things that I could do better. Let me observe someone who's doing it better than I am. Okay, on the other side of that, we personally become what we hate. You know that teacher we talked about that we hated during school? We personally become that when we don't take good care of ourselves, when we don't recognize our own needs, when we don't feed ourselves, when we are trying, and this is a frustrating thought, trying to pour from an empty cup. I'll give you an example of that. Sometimes when you're frustrated and a kid is getting on your nerves, you'll say something like this: don't make me be that teacher. You said it or you thought it, and I hope you don't say a teacher that's in your building. That's rude. But don't make me become that teacher. That means that's in your mindset, that you could devolve to the lowest form of teaching that you've seen, observed, and probably hated yourself. You get there because we can all get there if we're frustrated enough. If you're frustrated enough, if you're empty enough, you can become the teacher that you hate or don't want to be, or personally don't want to have done to you. You wouldn't want to be a student in that classroom. Don't be a teacher that wouldn't want to be a student in your own classroom. I want you to think about that, not only in how you present your material, but in how you set the environment for your room. Would I want to be a student in my own classroom? And if the answer is no, then there's work that we have to do. We have to determine to be better. Or if not, if we don't take care of ourselves, we become frustrated and the student becomes frustrated because you're wanting to give them something and maybe you just don't have anything left to give.
Really, I do feel like this is the most important thing when working with students, especially those that are that really try our patience. You've got to take care of yourself. You have to come into school every day and be emotionally available for those kids that come in from a really terrible situation at home. I've talked about this a lot, and some of you have probably already heard this story, but I taught in a structured setting, self-contained structured setting classroom. And every morning when I came into school, the kids were already there. I was a morning person. I wanted to come to school and get started and set up my classroom before the kids got there, but the way that our buses ran, they were there before I was. And for months and months, probably a good 6 months, I kept thinking that I was going to get to school and I was going to be able to set up my classroom, get things started, have 10 minutes to myself. And I don't know why I continued to think that, because every day the kids were already there. I couldn't do the thing that I thought that I was going to be able to do. And for 6 months, I continued to think that it was going to be different. I'd get to school and the kids were there and I was immediately hit with, I was Horgan at the time, Miss Horgan, we want to watch this movie. Can we do this? We need to do that. And I was not prepared. The thing that I had to change was me. I had to realize that I need to stay after school to set up my classroom because those kids are going to be here in the morning and I can't get it done then. Sometimes you have to change yourself. It was a little simple thing that I did that made my day so much better. So take care of yourself. Do the things that you know need to be done to make your day easier. For 6 months, I did something that I knew wasn't going to work. And I kept doing it. Like, that's crazy. But we do that. We continue to think that things are going to get better. Or if I just stick with this, or if I just keep doing this, it's going to be better. And it's not. Change what you're doing. Change how things are going. And if you change what you're doing, you may get different results.
Yeah, you don't want to continue to invest in a process that's not working. And the biggest investment that you make is not your money, it's your time. Because time is your only unreplenishable resource. You can get more money, but you can't get more time. So if you're divesting yourself of time on a process that's not working, it's going to be very frustrating. So sometimes you can't fall in love with processes that aren't working. And as she said, it's frustrating when you're trying to teach or when you're trying to pour into students, but they're immediately making withdrawals as soon as you get to school. So you have to be full. You have to be full by the time you get to work. Whatever that is for you, I don't know what it is. I like to run, exercise. Sometimes that's something I like to do in the morning so that I'm in my ideal state of dealing with students. It may be exercise, it may be getting your favorite Starbucks drink, no judgment here. Whatever that is, make sure that you're full. I know that on certain days, I usually don't eat during the day, but there are certain days where it's going to be long. I'm like, yeah, I better eat something. Because immediately, as she says, her students began to make withdrawals. As soon as she walked in, she couldn't sit down. And I know many of you feel that frustration. And some on different levels, even administratively. You try and come in and sit down at your computer, and before you do it, you have to address 3 problems that popped up on your email. Withdrawals are going to happen. The thing about it is you have to be responsible for making sure that your cup is full. And I'll tell you this, it's a lot easier for us to pour out of our cups than it is to fill them. Because filling our cups requires something outside of ourselves. We can pour out, it's easy for us to do it, but filling them up may mean that we need to spend time doing something else or with someone else, or taking time and being intentional with our time. It's important to be intentional. And for those of you who have been this summer, you've been doing your thing, I've had all the time to do everything I want to do. Well, school's coming. It's coming. I don't mean to be the bearer of bad news. Don't kill the messenger. But it's coming, and you're going to have to be more intentional with that. It's not going to happen by itself. And that's the point I take from what she said. It didn't happen by itself. She had to be intentional about creating that space to make sure that she could be full and prepared for the students who were making withdrawals from her as soon as she walked in the building. You have to be intentional about filling yourself. If you're not, you're setting yourself up for failure. Be intentional about making sure your cup is full. That is very important for your students because sometimes we're so selfless, we don't realize when we're setting ourselves up for failure. I got to spend this time on setting these lesson plans. I got to spend this time on reading this book. I got to spend this time on creating these things for my kids. And if you spend all of your time doing that and no time on yourself, then you're still not setting yourself up to be the best person you can be for your students. It's important for your kids for you to take time for yourself. I know this is right. How many married people do we have in here? Okay. You want your spouse to have a great day because you want to have a great day. Right. Yes. Do you want them to have a great day? So sometimes you might have to say, hey, you might have to push them to take time for themselves. Do you need to go shopping? Do you need to go to the golf course? Do you need to eat? What are those things that put you in an ideal space so that I can also experience that when I'm with you? Same thing for our students. Sometimes your students these days, they'll tell you. They'll be like, hey, it looks like you need a nap, or are you hungry? Sometimes you have some students who will point it out to you. They're like, yeah, I want you to be happy because my experience is going to be better if you have what you need. And that is just so important for us to do that for ourselves. Okay? What is the worst customer service experience that you have ever had? The worst customer service experience that you've ever had. I would like somebody to tell me. Do we have a hand?
I went to the movies one time to see like a horror movie that was rated R. And the like little man working the window was like, oh, I don't need to see your ID. You're way over 18. And I was like, that's not how you talk to women, sir.
Yeah, that is interesting. Wow. Anybody else? We have one right here.
So last summer we took our girls on the first Disney cruise, or first cruise experience, but we took Disney, and I talked my husband into taking this past summer, and he was already negative before we even got there. Well, they lost $600 worth of our clothes before the ship left the port. My oldest is autistic. And I kept trying to explain this to them. She's obsessed. She's been looking forward to wearing these 3 dresses for weeks. After we bought them, that's all she's talked about. And they said, well, we'll give you $50 and you can go buy it at the next port. I said, I can't buy that dress at the next port. I said, you don't understand. And they said, well, I'm sorry about that. I spent an hour and a half at customer service. Like, you need to find our suitcase. How did you lose an entire suitcase? And they were like, well, I'm sorry, there's just not much we can do. They would call us every morning to tell us they still don't know where it is. My husband said, how is that helpful to tell us every morning that you don't know where it is? And after spending an hour and a half at customer service, our first experience with them, my husband and I are like, let's just go to the comedy show. We drop the kids at the kids club. We get there and the guy goes, I gave your seats away. You're 5 minutes past time. I said, the show doesn't start for 10. And he goes, well, I'm sorry, you have to be here 15 minutes early. And we just gave you, I said, I've been at customer service for an hour and a half. He goes, I'm sorry about that. The seat over there is the only one left, and it was behind a pole. So we left, and my husband was in a bad mood the rest of the cruise.
Wow, and for those, just as an aside to understand, for those who don't understand having a child that is autistic, I had a young girl in my room, and during 6th grade orientation, they showed her where the bathroom was in the middle school. For the next 3 years, that was her bathroom.
She keeps asking me, and we still can't find them. Her 4-year-old little sister could care less. She's moved on. She got a new Paw Patrol toy. She could care less. My 8-year-old, that's all she keeps asking.
When you went to the customer service desk, that was a forced experience. You didn't say, hey, let me go spend an hour and a half on my cruise at the customer service desk. It was forced. You didn't desire to be there. I want you guys to get this. If you get this, this will change how you treat kids. Our students are in a forced customer service experience. It's forced. They don't want to be there. They'd rather be at home playing Roblox or something. They do not want to be there. They are legally obligated to be there. Their parents force them to be there. It is a forced customer service experience. And because of that, because it's forced, we have to be better. We have to be better. I'm sorry, you might retire and decide to do it, but you're not a barista on the beach in Hawaii. The person working the bar on the beach in Hawaii, he doesn't have to be great because you want to be there. You desire to be there. He can be flippant with you and you'll laugh and think it's, cheeky or something. You'll laugh it off, the experience off. So coming from a place of me being already frustrated, then I need that person to be better. I need them to be understanding. I've lost my bags. You've called me 4 days telling me you don't have them. I don't need you to tell me you don't know where they are again. I need you to tell me something different. I need you to be better. I don't need you to be snarky. I don't need you to be smart aleck. I don't need you to be dismissive. I need you to have a smile on your face, and I need you to show some actual contrition about my situation. because this is forced, I don't want to be here, and my being here is your fault. And a lot of times our kids blame us. You make us come to school. I've heard that many times. And one time it was correct. It was during COVID. I had a student who wanted to stay home, and I told the parent, I was like, Mom, the only issue this student has is social interactions. She's not going to get that by staying home for a whole year. She probably needs to come to school. So she blamed me, and she was correct. But she got better that year, and that's all I cared about. But those forced customer service interactions are important, that we be better because they don't want to be there. We're giving them something that they don't want. You're better than a quarterback. You know what a quarterback does? He has a prefabricated football in his hand, and he throws it to receivers who are highly skilled at receiving it. Well, as teachers, oftentimes you have to first create the football, put it in a deliverable format, and you're throwing to receivers who don't want it. So your job is a lot harder than a quarterback because your receivers don't want to be there and they don't want to receive what you're giving them. So having said that, we're customer service representatives, whether we want to be or not, and it's important that we be at our best when we're dealing with our students. Okay. What's more important, happy customers or happy staff? What's more important? Staff, there you go. Somebody take a chance. It's staff. Because this is true. Happy staff make happy customers. Happy customers don't necessarily make happy staff. It doesn't work in the inverse. But if you are fulfilled and if you're happy, then you're going to make the customers happy. I had to change. Like Katie said, she had to change. I had to change because I wasn't a morning person. I had to become a morning person. I had to change my schedule. I had to get up earlier. I had to make sure that I was fulfilled. For me, sometimes that's reading scripture. That's doing other things that make me happy. That makes me make sure I'm drinking plenty of water. Make sure I'm in a good mood. I had to change my whole morning routine so that I could be better. And then I'm not your naturally bubbly person anyway. So I had to be a more bubbly person in the morning. I was in there, I said, hey guys, good morning. This is this behavior class. None of them wanted to be there. They were all mad. They all frustrated. None of them wanted to be there, I promise you. But I guarantee you, their parents made sure they were there every day. My kid, you talking about perfect attendance? My kids had perfect attendance. You could count on them being there every day. So, but I had to be the one like, hey, how you doing? How was your weekend? You know, sometimes I get up and we'd walk outside our room. We had a door outside our room and we just walk around and get our blood flowing and our energy going. But I had to change who I was to make sure that I was the best for them. And then if I'm happy, if I'm fulfilled, if they feel that I'm fulfilled, then they'll be better. They won't be perfect, but they'll be better. I had a staff member ask me, because she knows I work with difficult students, she said, why are you always smiling? She said, don't you have bad days? And this is what I said to her. I said, I don't believe in bad days. I said that there are certain days that require more of you than others. There are certain days that require more of you than others. So every day is a good day. It's just some days require more of you than other days. And if you have that perspective, that's what your students need. That's what your students need. Because they'll tell you also, they're like, hey, you looks like you're having a bad day. Or, hey, man, the kids are very personal these days. You know, my wife's also a teacher. They'll ask some very personal questions. Hey, did you put your makeup on today? Did you get a chance to wash your hair? You know, were your kids acting up last night? They'll get in there with you. So we have to make sure that we're at our best when we're interacting with them. So if we're happy, we can cause them to be better. The opposite of that is also true. If we're not at our best, then we can instigate problems with the kids that we interact with. And we don't intend to, but we can cause their mood to come down. This is one of the things that happens, and it's unconsciously, and some of you, some of you have more difficulty managing your facial expressions than others. And watching your face is a real thing. You have to be careful. There was a student that one of our staff members was having a lot of trouble with, and the reason they were having trouble with the student is because the student knew that they could pick at her and change her facial expression, and then it was on. It was on, because he was going to take her on a ride the rest of the day because she could not control her facial expressions, and he recognized that he was frustrating her by the way her expressions were. So your facial expressions are important, okay? Make sure that you have taken good care of yourself, we kind of discussed that, before you see your students again. Again, be intentional about it. Be intentional. Go home and be intentional about it. What is it that you use to de-stress yourself? And if you're a brand new teacher, you may be experiencing this anew. You need to find out what is it that causes you to be relieved of stress. You do that thing. For some people, I'll talk about my mom. She can get on me later. My mom likes to clean. She's a cleaning person. A lot of you probably like, that's weird, but that's her. She loves to clean. My mom, vacuuming, cleaning, that's kind of the thing that de-stresses her. If that's your thing, go for it. But be aware of what that thing is and participate in it daily so that you can be your best the next day. Okay? Understand that behavior is communication. Katie, you want to kind of take?
Yeah. Everything that you do, everything that a student does, they're communicating something to you. Now, whether you can receive that information or not really depends on what your relationship is with that student, okay? But all behavior can mean different things. Is that student wanting attention from you? And not just student. Is that person wanting your attention? Does that person want to do something? Do they want a certain person? Maybe they want attention, but attention from you is not the person they want their attention from. It's the other teacher down the hall. It's the principal in the office. So how am I going to get that attention? What do I need to do? And their behavior will get what they want 95% of the time. So are they avoiding tasks? They don't want to do the schoolwork, so I'm going to do this behavior, and I'm not going to have to do that schoolwork, because that's how it always happens. All of those things are true, but the big thing, why do behaviors happen, is because students have an unmet need. It's not the thing that they're trying to get. Kids that are okay, they don't have behaviors. People that are okay, they don't have these negative behaviors, these negative outbursts. If that's happening, there's a need. There's an unmet need, and we need to create good relationships with our students so that we can figure out what that need is.
So what that kind of leads to the question, what are the hardest students for you to work with? What are the hardest students for you to work with? I just wanted to think of that. Some may be the disrespectful student, the student that refuses to do any work. It may be the student who's real slowful, or it may be the student who's just, he's trying to get on your nerves, as we discussed a minute ago. What are those students that are most difficult for you to work with? It's good for you to, again, this is an area where you need to know this because they're more likely to get under your skin than other students. And you need to be aware of which students are most likely to frustrate you. Because if you have some awareness, you can be better. If you don't have awareness, then you're going to respond to that student. They're going to get on your nerves, they're going to say something, and then you're going to respond, and you're going to have an automatic response that might not be therapeutic, that might not be something that you wish to say in terms of how you treat them. You may treat them in a way that later you wish you had taken back, or maybe you hadn't been as sharp or harsh with them. You need to be aware of which students really get on your nerves and frustrate you. And a lot of times it's the disrespectful student. I'm giving a show of hands. Who has trouble with disrespectful students? It's hard. It's difficult. We're human beings. And some students, and it's usually my disrespectful students, they're hard to like. And the elephant in the room, for those who deal with behavior, you already know this, is it's difficult to be your best if you don't like that student. It's difficult to be your best. Because they're not always, it doesn't mean, they're not mutually exclusive. You can have a student with behavior issues who's real likable. They're funny. I had a kid, he was just super honest, loved this kid. He always told the truth. He would do stuff, but he'd tell me. I'd be like, hey man, did you do this? He's like, yeah, I did. He was always going to tell me the truth. In fact, one day he was late to school. And I said, why are you late? He said, do you want me to tell you the reason my mom told me to tell you? Or do you want me to tell you what it really was? And I said, I have a feeling you're going to tell me both. And he did. He told me both. Kid, easy to work with. He was very likable. He did things he shouldn't, but people liked him. And then you have others who are not as personable, and it's more difficult to like them. And we have to work harder on those students. That's why I said it's important. Please identify the students you struggle with, because you're going to have to work harder for that. Some of the people I work with now talk about how organized I am now. Organization was something I had trouble with. I had to work hard on it. So now I'm super organized, but I had to work on it because I've put so much work in. I'm there, but I recognize and identified that as a weakness, so I had to work harder on it. If there are students like that, work harder on them and be prepared for interactions with them. Okay?
For me, when I first started working as an EA, really, my hardest group of students were students with autism. And even back then, when I first started as an EA, autism wasn't really diagnosed that often, not like it is now. I could not, it was the routine, the things, like all of a sudden, just like that, a student would have a meltdown. And I didn't know why, because I hadn't done this for long. I didn't have the experience to understand, oh, they did that because we changed our schedule today, and they didn't have the ability to communicate that with me and tell me that. They were I remember thinking, oh gosh, another student with autism is going to be on my roll this year. I don't know how I'm going to handle that. I did not understand what the need was. And then sometimes when I did know what the need was, there was nothing I could do about it. They're not having chicken nuggets today for lunch in the cafeteria. Well, I can't fix that. But like Dr. Chrisman said, I had to work hard. And once I learned how students with autism tend to work, now they're all different, but there are triggers that they have that you can plan for. You have to get to know the kids, but once I figured it out, now the students with autism are my favorite. They're the easiest to me because they can be very predictable, but you have to know what to look for. It was a struggle for me at first, but I researched, I learned, I talked to parents, and really, parents know so much more about their kids than anybody else. If you will talk to the parents, they can tell you, oh, I know why he did that. We got new shoes yesterday, and he can't stand the way they feel on his feet. That lets me know, okay, well, there are some accommodations we can make for them. Maybe we can wear slides for most of the day, but then he has to just wear his shoes in the hallway. There are things that you can do once you figure it out. It's the unmet need that I didn't know how to reach for a few years that made that so difficult. But you have to work hard to figure out how to fix it. And I did. And like I said, now that's my favorite population of students to work with because I think they're the easiest.
The key to what she's saying is you have to be willing to change. Mm-hmm. You can't be so reticent and say, this is what I do, and you're not going to change it. You have to be willing to change. I always call students by their last names because it was so predictable. Had it one student who they had a last name of an absent parent, and they did not want to be called by their last name. I had to change. I had to adapt to that student. And we have to be willing to change. There was one student, I'm a person who, I don't yell, I don't raise my voice. That's just not who I usually am. Had one student, I had to raise my voice to him, or otherwise he wasn't listening. That's what he was used to. That I had to be able to adapt to what the student needs. And we have to be willing and able to adapt to what our students need. And what Katie was saying about the unmet need, that's your most difficult student. The student who has an unmet need that you cannot reach. Some of those needs are things you can't control. I had a student who wore the same clothes like 4 days in a row. I can't change that. We made calls, we did the things that were necessary, but I can't change his home environment. I can't change the fact that he's not the last meal that he gets of the day may be his lunch at school. The only person who cares about whether his clothes are clean may be the student, that may be the teacher at school. There are unmet needs that you cannot reach, and you have to be aware of that. But I'll tell you something, your student with the unmet need appreciates the teacher who makes them feel safe, appreciates the teacher who makes them feel loved. How many teachers in here have been teaching for at least 20 years? Anybody? That's awesome. Anybody 25 years? All right, 30? Oh, so you give these guys about 30 years. That is amazing. During that time, I promise you that you've had students come back to you who've said, you were my favorite teacher. I loved your class. And some of the students you hear say that, you're like, you didn't act like you liked my class. You didn't treat me as if you liked me. But what was happening is that they had unmet needs that they knew and they understand now were never your fault. But you made them feel wanted. They felt safe in your room. They felt emotionally supported. Rarely is it ever about the content. It's about how you made them feel in that class, and they understand now as adults, they had unmet needs that were never our fault, but you made them feel safe, and you made them feel heard, and you made them feel supported. And half of what we do is about how we make those students feel when they're in our rooms, because you cannot address that unmet need, but they feel safe in your rooms, and that's part of our jobs. All right? Cannot treat all students the same. It's a fiction. You can't treat them all the same. Their needs are different. I have identical twins, and you can't treat them the same. I can tell you that. I have one son who, we're at MTSU, he's at MTSU. So we have a teacher discount, that's a form you have to fill out. On the day that his classes were to be dropped, I said, hey son, I need to fill out that teacher form for you so you can keep your classes. He's like, oh yeah, you probably need to fill that out. I have another son who does that 4 months in advance and is frustrated when you're late. I was going golfing with him 2 weeks ago, and he's sitting at my door trying to tell me to hurry up because he likes to arrive at the golf course 45 minutes early. That's him. Twins, identical DNA, but they're different. And they need different things. One of my sons, everybody knows. My other son, nobody knows that he's the other twin's brother. They're like, oh, you have a twin brother. I have a son, he doesn't meet a stranger. He knows, every time he talks to you as if he's known you for 5-10 years. Identical DNA, but they're different, and they need different things. They need to be supported in different ways. So it does not matter how similar two students might be, like she mentioned, even with autism. Not every autistic student is the same. But these students, you can't treat them the same because they have different needs. And it seems like we understand better academically than we do emotionally and behaviorally. So if you know there's one student, you write it on the board, he got it. There's another student, you're gonna have to go over it a few more times. But that's what they need to get to the same place. Behaviorally, it's the same. Some of them need more supports than others. I often say I wish people could think of students with emotional behavioral needs as having a wheelchair in their brains. You wouldn't ask a student with a wheelchair to go up a flight of steps. That's how an emotional behavior student feels like when you tell them to calm down. You're asking them to go up a flight of steps. If I could do that, then I wouldn't be where I am. But I need extra support and I need extra help. And just like we support and have accommodations for the student who has a wheelchair that needs to get to the next level of the building, we need to have supports and be patient and be ready to accommodate the student who needs assistance calming down, transitioning between tasks. Students who have difficulty with unstructured times, in the hallways, right before school, during dismissal, during lunch. They just need extra supports, and we need to be willing and able to give them the supports they need to be successful. All right?
And just like it says there, do all of your students need the same amount of help with math or with reading? When you think about kids that come into kindergarten, none of them are at the same level. Some of them can already read. Some of them can't identify letters. So we spend time teaching reading. When you think about it, we start teaching reading in preschool and teach it all the way until they graduate from high school. We start with teaching them the letters and how to sound out words, and then we teach them how to comprehend what they're reading. And then we teach them how to write, I'm not a high school teacher, write papers about what they've read, all the way until they graduate, interpret literature. For their entire school career, we teach them reading. We don't ever teach kids how to behave, or we think, well, I taught them that for like 3 months and they're not getting it, so it just doesn't work. But you teach reading for 13 years. Behavior needs to be the same way. They will grow and they will learn and they will have different needs as they get older. But we need to teach behavior in the same way we think about teaching reading, math, science, social studies. We do it their entire career in school. It needs to be the same with behavior. Yes?
I think sometimes in the challenge with middle school is that, you've got 7 teachers with all different ideas of what that behavior should look like. So then the student is now really getting consistency for the expectations. And even though that's what the student needs.
That's true, because a lot of times we give them confusing responses as to what their behavior should look like. We say things to them that are vague, like, I just need you to be on task. What does on task look like? I need you to be like the other kids. Well, lady, if I could be like the other kids, I would have already done that already. We give them confusing and vague responses as to what, and your point is well taken, as to what we need to be very direct, especially with our autistic kids. When you're literal, make sure you mean that literally, because they're going to take it literally. So that they understand, we need to complete these 5 problems. We're on this page. This is the only page you need to be on. I need you to read the material on this page. Be very specific as to your point, as to what is necessary and what you want the student to do, and then then they'll have a clearer understanding of what that is. But a lot of times, be good, be on task, act like the other kids, do better, they're vague. And sometimes we need to be more directed with our students and say, this is what I need you to accomplish in my room. And a lot of times there are some requirements that you have where you put on the board, this is what success looks like. But we need to be explicit and direct with our students, and that helps that's more a universal design of learning for our students. It helps your autistic kids, and it helps your kids who maybe they're not autistic, but they just want an explanation as to what do I need to do to be successful in your room today. And then we might have to make modifications as to what success looks like. I had a student where success looked like she stayed awake all day and she didn't hit anybody. Okay? So sometimes what success looks like might be different. It might not be completing 30 problems. It might be attempting work. And that's, again, goes back to we can't treat them all the same. What success looks like for my student who's violent and hits people may be different than my high achiever. So we need to be clear in our expectations as to what success looks like and be very little and explicit in our instructions. Do we have a question?
Well, it's not really a question, but I had a student last year that he came new to our county, and he was an 8th grader, really sweet kid. But I had one teacher that had a really difficult time dealing with him because he did things like, you'd give him fidgets, but he'd tear up pencils that came from home, tear them up in little pieces and make a mess. Well, so I'm like, tell him to clean it up. She goes, well, he just makes a mess. I'm like, get a broom. And he would. You tell him. Or he'd make random noises every once in a while, like he couldn't control it. Now, he was listening, but he processed slower, but he actually knew things if you asked him the question, but if you asked him to write it. But it was like I had to make accommodations in the IEP that specifically said because he was getting pink slips. And I'm like, no, you can't do that. It's like, it's not that hard. And finally, she's like, oh, that works.
I'm going to challenge you on it's not that hard. It's not that hard for you.
Right. And I was very patient, but I'm like...
And understand that we are a product of our experiences. And as behavior specialists, I'll just be honest. Sometimes we look at things, situation, we're like, oh, that's a problem? I literally was in a room with a student who was IED, intermittent explosive disorder, and he was textbook case. I was on the floor restraining this student when my phone was ringing in my room. Somehow, I think that it fell off because it was ringing so hard. It was an old phone. I grabbed the phone. They asked me, they said, hey, this student of yours is real talkative. I need to send him back to the room. I'm literally in a restraint. I'm like, go ahead. But what is a crisis to some is not a crisis to others. And what is a big deal to some is not a big deal to others. And that's going to vary based on, our own proclivities, our own experience, and what we can handle and what we can manage. So what might be easy for you may be a little more difficult for someone else to manage. So we're different, the students are different, but, again, I always put it this way, what hill am I dying on today? What hill am I dying on? Okay.
I've been doing this will be my 36th year.
Right. That's
I'm
awesome.
kind of like...
You've seen a few things in 36 years. So you understand the hills, and you're like, I understand the purpose of what we need to accomplish today. And if a kid tears up a pencil in the process of doing their best, you might be able to handle that, and another teacher, it's driving them nuts. But we have to lower our sensitivity about certain things and understand what is the objective for this day. You have a question over here?
I just wanted to also comment on the fact that we can do such a good job of making accommodations in our classrooms in special education that we forget to begin with the end in mind. And so we've made these wonderful classrooms where these children can function in our presence in our classroom with our accommodations, but we have to prepare them for real life. We have to prepare them to take the next step into that classroom where they don't have those modifications, into that world where they don't have those accommodations. And this is oftentimes where we then see the step backs, the fall downs, the decline, and so we have to keep that in mind, that as we're preparing them and we're making these wonderful steps, we have to teach them resilience. They have to learn that.
Important. And then also support, because this is what I know we see a lot. You can give them certain levels of support in an enclosed classroom, and then if you don't have a mid-level of support in between, then you're setting the student up to fail. So for my behavior classroom, for example, one of the first things that they had to do in my room is they had to be able to tolerate 50 minutes of work before they left my room. And they were like, why do I have to do this? I said, I'm preparing you to go out. And if you can't work for 50 straight minutes, you're going to fail in that other classroom. The next thing that we did is we had assistants, behavior assistants that went with them. So when they did go out to class, they didn't go by themselves. They went with an assistant who then did tolerance in the room. I said, I want you to sit by them at first, then I want you to move further and further away until it's as if you're not there. And then when they don't need you, then we can take you away. But again, that next level, that mid-level of support is very important. And if we skip that step, we're setting our students up to fail.
Teach kids how to monitor their own behavior. Like for me, well, let's go back to talking about schedules for students. Well, they're not always going to have a schedule. Why not? I do. I have a schedule. It's my calendar on my phone. It tells me where to go and what I'm doing every day. I now am the owner of my accommodations, but they're still my accommodations. They're still things that I need. So to So don't think that these kids are not going to need them when they leave you. They will still need those things, but we want to teach them, just like we teach reading for 12 years, we need to teach them also how to manage those accommodations that work for them. There are a lot of things that I do to make myself successful in my work, but that's because I manage it. But I wasn't able to manage it when I was in elementary school. My mom used to pin my lunch money, literally pin my lunch money on my jacket because I would lose it from home to school. When I was in college, I lost my student ID. I was a senior, and I went to get another one, and the lady at the student services room told me that I had lost my ID more than anybody else in the entire college. They got a lot of my money for new IDs. But so I still have these issues. I just have learned how to manage it. And it doesn't mean that, sometimes I don't lose my keys. I did. I lost my keys just a couple weeks ago for like 3 weeks, and then they turned up. So I still have these issues, but I have learned how to manage them myself better. But my mom still pinned my lunch money to my coat until I was in middle school because I needed it. She didn't have to do that to my brother, like he says. Like, kids are different. But we have to be willing to make those accommodations and help them as they grow.